There are secrets that don't destroy families because they are told. They destroy them because they are hidden. 17-year-old Abigail Foster thought the worst day of her life was when her own father threw her out after her pregnancy became public. Hungry, homeless, and 8 months pregnant, she believed she had lost everything. Then she returned a wealthy stranger's wallet instead of stealing the thousands of dollars inside. By nightfall, she was sleeping in a luxurious mansion. By the end of the week, she realized she had never truly been a guest. The nursery had already been prepared. The paperwork already carried her name. And the man who promised to save her had been speaking to her father all along. The question was no longer who had abandoned Abigail. It was who was planning to take her baby. Before we begin, tell me in the comments where you're watching from today. If stories of courage, faith, and unexpected hope touch your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with us until the very end. A cold November rain drifted across Charleston, turning the Greyhound terminal into a place where even strangers hurried away without looking back. Abigail Foster pulled the collar of her old wool coat closer, even though it no longer reached around her stomach. She had stopped trying to button it 3 weeks ago. Every morning she still reached for the last button out of habit, and every morning her fingers found the same impossible truth. There wasn't enough room anymore. Not for the baby, not for excuses, not for the life she used to have. The electronic departure board flickered above the nearly empty station. Buses came and went. Families hugged goodbye. College students laughed over paper coffee cups. Nobody noticed the 17-year-old girl sitting alone with a faded backpack and less than $40 tucked inside her pocket. She hadn't eaten a real meal in 2 days. The baby shifted gently beneath her ribs. "I'm trying," Abigail whispered, resting both hands against her stomach. "I'm really trying." Her voice disappeared beneath the sound of another bus pulling away. 3 days earlier, her father had placed her backpack outside the front door without raising his voice. Dr. Gregory Foster had built his career on calm decisions. As director of Charleston Regional Hospital, people admired his steady hands and perfect composure. He used that same composure when he looked at his daughter. "This is best for everyone." Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I'll help." Just 6 words spoken as if he were explaining a medical diagnosis. Her mother had stood behind him, crying silently but saying nothing. Abigail had waited for someone to stop her. Nobody did. She walked until her legs hurt, slept wherever she could stay warm, and learned that hunger didn't arrive all at once. It came in quiet waves, stealing little pieces of your dignity every hour. By late afternoon, the cold became unbearable. She wandered through unfamiliar streets until rows of stone monuments appeared beyond iron gates. The cemetery was almost empty. Fresh flowers rested beside polished headstones. Someone had left sandwiches, fruit, and homemade cookies beside several family graves, following an old tradition of remembering loved ones. Abigail stopped. Her entire body tightened with shame. She knew those meals weren't meant for her. She also knew the baby hadn't stopped moving all day. After nearly 5 minutes, she picked up a single dinner roll from one plate. "I'm sorry," she whispered toward the grave. She ate slowly, each bite making her feel both grateful and guilty. The warm bread settled inside her empty stomach like a promise she wasn't sure she deserved. As she wandered deeper between the quiet rows of granite, something caught her eye. A thick, black leather wallet rested against a polished headstone. It looked expensive, too expensive to have been forgotten. She picked it up. Inside were neatly stacked $100 bills, several platinum credit cards, and a business card. Daniel Whitmore, President, Whitmore Development. Her heartbeat quickened. There had to be several $1,000s inside, enough to rent a small apartment, enough to buy baby clothes, enough to survive for months. For one dangerous second, every desperate thought rushed through her mind. Nobody would know. Nobody had seen her. Her father had chosen his reputation over her. Why should she keep choosing honesty? The baby kicked sharply. Abigail closed the wallet. She lowered herself onto a nearby stone bench instead. "If I become someone else today," she whispered through trembling lips, "I'll never find my way back." So she waited. 10 minutes passed, then 15. The November wind carried fallen leaves across the narrow path. Finally, footsteps echoed behind her. A tall man in a charcoal overcoat stopped several feet away. His eyes moved from Abigail to the wallet, then to the unmistakable curve beneath her coat. Neither of them spoke. Abigail stood slowly and held the wallet toward him with both hands. "I think this belongs to you." The man accepted it without immediately opening it. Instead, he studied her face with quiet curiosity. "You didn't take anything?" She shook her head. "I thought about it." The honesty surprised even her. "But thinking isn't the same as doing." Something changed in the man's expression. Not pity, respect. He opened the wallet, glanced inside, then looked back at her. "What is your name?" "Abigail Foster." The man's eyebrows lifted almost imperceptibly. "Foster," he repeated softly. After a long silence, he asked one question that made Abigail's blood run cold. "Would your father happen to be Dr. Gregory Foster?" She stared at him. "How do you know my father?" "I've worked with Charleston Regional Hospital for years," the man replied calmly. "Your father and I know each other." Abigail felt something tighten inside her chest. The world suddenly seemed much smaller than it had a moment ago. Daniel looked at her worn shoes, her pale face, and the coat that could no longer hide her pregnancy. "Have you eaten today?" She forced a smile. "One dinner roll." He nodded once, as though making a decision. "Come with me." "Why?" "Because no 17-year-old should be alone in this weather." A black luxury sedan rolled quietly toward the cemetery entrance. As Abigail climbed into the warm back seat, she watched the iron gates disappear through the rain-covered window. She couldn't explain why, but deep inside, she had the unsettling feeling that returning a wallet had not ended her nightmare. It had only opened the first door. The black sedan moved silently through the rain, leaving the old cemetery behind as Charleston's evening lights blurred across the windows. Abigail sat stiffly in the back seat, one hand resting protectively over her stomach. Warm air filled the cabin, yet she couldn't stop shivering. After 3 nights spent on bus benches and cold sidewalks, comfort itself felt unfamiliar. Part of her wanted to relax. Another part whispered that nothing this generous ever came without a reason. Daniel Whitmore never tried to force a conversation. He simply looked out the opposite window, giving her the kind of silence that didn't feel empty. It felt measured, as if he understood that some people needed quiet before they could trust words again. "You don't have to tell me anything tonight," he finally said. "Just eat something." Abigail nodded without looking at him. She had heard promises before. Promises from teachers who said everything would work out, from neighbors who claimed they would check on her, even from her father, years ago, when he promised he would always protect her. Promises were easy. Keeping them was harder. The sedan slowed before a pair of iron gates that opened automatically. Beyond them stretched a quiet neighborhood unlike anything Abigail had ever seen. Every lawn was perfectly trimmed. Stone homes stood behind elegant trees, stripped nearly bare by autumn. Soft lights glowed from windows, giving the entire street the appearance of a holiday postcard. The car stopped in front of a large, white house. Before Daniel could reach for the handle, the front door opened. A woman stepped onto the porch. She wore a cream-colored sweater and dark jeans, her chestnut hair tied neatly behind her head. Her smile appeared naturally, but Abigail noticed something else before the smile reached her eyes. The woman's gaze drifted briefly to her stomach. Only for a second. Then it returned to her face. "You must be freezing," she said warmly. "Come inside." Daniel spoke quietly. "Claire, this is Abigail." Claire simply nodded. "I'm glad you're here." Not, "Who is she?" Not, "What happened?" Just those 4 words. Inside, the house smelled of fresh bread, cinnamon, and burning firewood. Abigail almost forgot how homes were supposed to smell. The dining table had already been set, soup steamed gently beside fresh rolls and roasted chicken. She stared at the food, embarrassed by how desperately she wanted it. Claire noticed. "Please," she said softly, "eat before it gets cold." Abigail picked up her spoon carefully, trying to appear polite. That lasted less than 30 seconds. Her hunger won. She finished the soup before realizing how quickly she had eaten. "I'm sorry," she whispered, lowering her eyes. Claire only smiled. "Don't apologize for being hungry." Those words struck Abigail harder than she expected. Nobody had said something kind to her in weeks. Daniel remained unusually quiet throughout dinner. He watched without staring, noticing every small detail, the way Abigail instinctively shielded her stomach whenever she shifted in her chair, the dark circles beneath her eyes, the hesitation every time she accepted another piece of bread, as though she feared someone might suddenly tell her she had eaten enough. "How far along?" Claire asked gently. "Almost 8 months." Claire's fingers tightened around her coffee mug almost imperceptibly. "And your doctor?" "I haven't been in almost 2 months." Neither Daniel nor Claire criticized her. Instead, Daniel simply looked toward his wife. "We'll have Dr. Collins come tomorrow." Abigail immediately shook her head. "I can't pay." "You don't have to." "I don't want charity," Daniel answered calmly. "I didn't offer charity." "What did you offer?" "A safe place to sleep." His answer sounded so simple that Abigail couldn't argue with it. Claire led her upstairs. The guest room overlooked the backyard, where maple leaves covered the grass like patches of copper. Everything inside looked untouched. Fresh towels, clean blankets, a vase filled with white lilies, even a small nightlight beside the bed. Abigail slowly sat on the mattress. It was softer than anything she had slept on in years. Claire paused at the doorway. "If you need anything tonight," she hesitated. "Anything at all. Just ask." After the door closed, Abigail remained motionless. Something felt strange. Not dangerous, just unusual. Nothing in the room suggested someone had rushed to prepare for an unexpected guest. The towels were folded perfectly. The closet already contained spare maternity pajamas. Even the bathroom shelf held unopened prenatal vitamins. Almost as if someone had expected a pregnant woman to arrive. She quickly shook away the thought. "You're imagining things." People like Daniel and Claire were simply organized. That had to be the explanation. Outside her room, faint voices drifted through the hallway. She couldn't hear every word, only Daniel's low voice. "She hasn't seen—" Then Claire, "Not yet." Silence followed. Abigail stood carefully and pressed her ear against the bedroom door. Nothing. A few moments later, she heard footsteps walking away. She climbed back into bed, but sleep refused to come. The warmth of the room should have made her feel safe. Instead, the quiet made every thought louder. Why had Daniel recognized her last name so quickly? Why had Claire seemed completely unsurprised to see a pregnant teenager standing on her porch? And why? Did the room feel less like a guest room, and more like it had been waiting for someone exactly like her? The following morning arrived wrapped in pale gray light. Rain still clung to the windows, leaving tiny trails that slowly slid down the glass. For the first time in days, Abigail woke without aching from cold concrete beneath her back. It frightened her how quickly comfort could feel normal. A folded note rested beside the bedroom door. "Breakfast is downstairs. Don't rush. Claire." The handwriting was neat and graceful. Abigail stared at the note for several seconds before walking downstairs. The smell of pancakes and fresh coffee filled the kitchen. Claire stood by the stove while Daniel read the morning newspaper. Their conversation stopped the instant Abigail entered. "Good morning," Claire said with a warm smile. "Morning. You slept well?" "I think so." Daniel folded the newspaper. "Dr. Melissa Collins will be here in 30 minutes. I told you yesterday I can't afford a doctor." "You don't need to." "I don't like owing people." Daniel looked directly at her. "Then don't think of it as a debt." His answer settled nothing. Half an hour later, the family physician arrived carrying a black leather medical bag. She spent nearly 40 minutes examining Abigail. The baby's heartbeat echoed through the small Doppler monitor. Strong, steady, healthy. Abigail felt tears gathering in her eyes before she realized she was crying. For weeks, she had lived with a silent fear that all the hunger, stress, and sleepless nights had hurt her child. "The baby is doing well," Dr. Collins said reassuringly. Then her expression became more serious. "But you are not." She checked Abigail's blood pressure again. "You're severely anemic. Your blood pressure is much too low." Claire quietly wrote notes while listening. "I'll prepare an iron-rich meal plan." The doctor nodded. "She needs proper nutrition every few hours, plenty of rest, no unnecessary stress." After she left, Claire handed Abigail a small notebook. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack times. Vitamin reminders. Every page had already been prepared. Abigail blinked. "You made this morning?" Claire hesitated. "I've had it for a while." "For a while?" Claire quickly smiled. "I mean, I keep templates like this." The explanation sounded reasonable, yet something inside Abigail remained unsettled. Days passed. Her dizziness slowly disappeared. Color returned to her cheeks. She began helping Claire in the kitchen despite repeated protests. The simple routine almost felt like family. Almost. One afternoon she noticed something strange. Claire never asked about the baby's father, not once. She never asked why Abigail had been thrown out. She never criticized her. She only asked one question every morning. "How are you feeling today?" Nothing else. It was as if Abigail's past didn't matter. Only her pregnancy did. The thought lingered in her mind. On the 6th day, Abigail searched for Claire upstairs. She accidentally opened the wrong door. The room beyond stole her breath. Soft, yellow walls, a white rocking chair, tiny stuffed animals lined across a shelf. A brand-new crib stood beside the window. Folded baby blankets filled neatly labeled baskets. Everything was ready. Not almost ready. Ready. Claire turned around holding a tiny knitted sweater. "Oh," she said quietly. "I thought Daniel came home." Abigail couldn't take her eyes off the nursery. "It's beautiful." Claire smiled with unexpected tenderness. "I've dreamed about this room for years." She gently folded the sweater. "Our little one deserves the best." The words echoed inside Abigail's head. Our little one. Not your baby, not the baby, our. Claire seemed to realize what she had said. She immediately looked away. I meant... It's okay," Abigail replied softly. But it wasn't. That single sentence followed her for the rest of the afternoon. The next morning, Abigail decided to walk outside. The security gate stood open. Freedom was only a few steps away. As she approached, the security guard smiled politely. "Good morning, Miss Foster." She smiled back. "I'm just taking a walk." "Certainly." Then he hesitated. "I'll just let Mr. Whitmore know you've gone out." Abigail stopped walking. "You have to tell him." "Yes, ma'am." "Why?" "For your safety." His answer came too quickly, too rehearsed. She looked beyond the gates toward the quiet street. Nobody stood in her way. Nobody physically stopped her. Yet somehow, she no longer felt free. She turned around and walked back toward the house. That evening, Daniel arrived home later than usual. Abigail waited in the living room. "I have a question." He loosened his tie. "Go ahead." "Why does the guard report every time I leave?" Daniel answered without hesitation. "You're 8 months pregnant. If something happened, we'd need to know where you are." His explanation sounded perfectly logical. Too logical. "How long will that continue?" Daniel looked at her calmly. "Until the baby is born." Those 5 words settled over the room like cold rain. Until the baby is born. Not until you're stronger. Not until you find a place to live. Only until the baby is born. That night Abigail couldn't sleep. The nursery, the notebook, Claire's words, the security guard, every memory fit together like pieces of a puzzle she didn't want to solve. Unable to quiet her thoughts, she walked quietly downstairs for a glass of water. As she passed Daniel's study, she noticed the door was slightly open. A phone charger rested on the desk. She stepped inside. Then her eyes fell upon a thick folder lying beside the lamp. Across the top page in bold black letters were words that froze the blood in her veins. Abigail Foster, medical records. Slowly, with trembling fingers, she reached for the folder. Abigail's fingers trembled as she lifted the folder from Daniel Whitmore's desk. The first pages contained exactly what she expected. Blood pressure, ultrasound reports, iron levels, doctor's notes from Melissa Collins. Every medical detail from the past week had been carefully documented. She turned another page, then another. At the bottom of the file rested a legal document. The title alone made her stomach tighten. Voluntary Adoption Consent. Her breathing stopped. Her full name had already been typed into the document. Abigail Rose Foster. Age, 17. Expected delivery date. Medical identification number. Everything had been completed. Everything except her signature. She stared at the blank line reserved for the biological mother's approval. It was empty. But the form had been prepared, ready, waiting. The nursery, Claire's words, the security guard, the doctor's visits. Every strange moment suddenly fit together. Abigail quietly returned every page exactly where she had found it. She closed the folder, picked up the phone charger, walked back upstairs, closed her bedroom door. Only then did she allow herself to cry. Not because Daniel and Claire were evil. That would have been easier. They had fed her, protected her, taken care of her. But somewhere between kindness and hope, they had begun making decisions that belonged only to her. She barely slept. The next morning, Daniel left for work before sunrise. Claire spent the morning gardening in the backyard. Abigail remembered something. Daniel had forgotten his phone beside the coffee machine yesterday. He always seemed rushed on Fridays. She waited. At exactly 7:15, the front door closed. A car engine faded into the distance. Claire stepped outside carrying pruning shears. Abigail walked slowly into the kitchen. The phone lay exactly where she hoped, unlocked. Her heart pounded. She knew she had only minutes. She searched the contact list. One name appeared almost immediately. Gregory Foster. Her father's number. She opened the message history. The first text had been sent the night Daniel found her. Daniel, I found your daughter. She's safe. Call me. 23 minutes later. Gregory, thank God. How is she? Daniel, she ate. She's sleeping. Abigail swallowed. She kept reading. Most conversations were short, professional, cold. Then she found a voice message. She hesitated before pressing play. Her father's familiar voice filled the silent kitchen. Daniel, you understand my position. Hospital accreditation is in January. I can't have reporters discovering this now. Abigail gripped the edge of the counter. Let her stay with you for a while. A pause. I'll cover every expense. Another pause. Please don't tell her I've been asking. The recording ended. Abigail couldn't breathe. He knew exactly where she was. Every day, every week. He simply chose not to come. Not because he couldn't, because he wouldn't. Another recording waited beneath the first. She pressed play. She's a smart girl, Gregory said quietly. When everything settles down, she'll understand. The kitchen blurred. Abigail realized tears were falling onto Daniel's phone. She wiped them away immediately. Not because she wanted to protect the phone, because she refused to leave evidence she had been there. Before putting the phone back, another notification appeared, a message from Claire. Curiosity won. She opened it. Claire, she's so young and completely alone. Daniel, I know. Claire, maybe this is God's way of bringing us together. Several hours later. Daniel, don't rush her. Claire, I won't. Daniel, if she ever agrees, it has to be her choice. Abigail continued reading. Message after message. Claire confessed how desperately she wanted a child after years of failed fertility treatments. Daniel admitted he had already spoken with an attorney about legal adoption. Neither message mentioned forcing Abigail. Neither sounded cruel, but both assumed something enormous, that eventually she would give them her baby. The realization hurt in a completely different way. Daniel and Claire weren't monsters. They genuinely believed they were rescuing both Abigail and the baby. Good intentions, terrible boundaries. Abigail quietly returned the phone exactly where it had been. Then she walked upstairs. For nearly an hour, she sat beside the bedroom window, watching bare tree branches sway in the November wind. She thought about running. But where? Back to bus stations? Back to hunger? Back to sleeping outside 8 months pregnant? No. Running solved nothing. She needed answers, real ones. She picked up her own phone, opened the voice recorder, tested it. Perfect. Then she searched her contacts. One number remained saved. Dad. Her thumb hovered above the screen. Finally, she pressed call. It rang 4 times. Abigail? His voice sounded cautious. Almost afraid. You know where I am, she said calmly. Silence. I want you to come here. Another silence. Tomorrow evening, he finally answered. All right. She ended the call without another word. Standing outside beneath the gray autumn sky, Abigail looked toward the Whitmore house. Inside, Claire was preparing dinner. Daniel believed everything remained under control. Her father believed time would erase his betrayal. Neither of them knew that tomorrow evening they would all sit at the same dinner table, and before that night ended, every secret in the room would finally have a voice. The dining room felt colder than the November wind outside. 4 people sat around the polished oak table. Dinner had been served, but no one was eating. Daniel Whitmore sat at the head of the table. Claire quietly folded and unfolded her napkin. Across from them sat Dr. Gregory Foster, wearing the same calm expression that had earned the respect of an entire hospital. Only Abigail knew how fragile that calm truly was. She reached into her pocket. Her phone rested in her palm. The voice recorder was already running. For several long seconds, no one spoke. Finally, Gregory cleared his throat. "You look healthier." Abigail met his eyes. "I almost died hungry before I got here." His expression stiffened. "I didn't know it had become that serious." "You never asked." Silence. Claire lowered her eyes. Daniel quietly set down his fork. Gregory forced a slow breath. "I wanted you to be somewhere safe." "You wanted me somewhere invisible." The words landed like broken glass. Gregory looked away. "You don't understand everything that was happening." "The hospital accreditation?" Abigail asked calmly. "The board inspection?" His eyes widened. "You heard that?" "I heard everything." She placed her phone on the center of the table. Without another word, she pressed play. Gregory's recorded voice filled the room. "Hospital accreditation is in January. Let her stay with you. I'll cover every expense." "Don't tell her I've been asking." When the recording ended, no one moved. Claire covered her mouth. Daniel stared silently at the table. Gregory looked 20 years older. "I can explain," he whispered. Abigail slowly shook her head. "No." "You already did." Daniel finally spoke. "Abigail," she turned toward him, "I also found the adoption papers." Claire closed her eyes. Daniel didn't deny it. "Yes. They were ready before you ever asked me. I never intended to force you. But you prepared everything." Another silence. Daniel nodded. "You're right." He looked at Claire before continuing. "We lost 3 pregnancies." Claire wiped away a tear. "Doctors finally told us we'd never have children." Her voice trembled. "When Daniel brought you home, I saw a frightened girl." She paused. "And I saw the child we'd prayed for. I know that wasn't fair." "I know now." Abigail watched her carefully. There was no hatred in Claire's face, only heartbreak. Daniel spoke again. "We convinced ourselves we were helping you." "We never realized we had stopped listening to what you wanted." Abigail answered quietly. "I believe you." Both Daniel and Claire looked up. "I believe neither of you wanted to hurt me. But kindness without permission can still become control." Neither of them argued, because neither of them could. Abigail turned toward her father. "You chose your reputation." Gregory closed his eyes. "I did." "You chose the hospital."
Yes.
"You chose silence instead of your daughter." A tear rolled down his cheek. For the first time in Abigail's life, she saw the respected physician disappear. Only a frightened father remained. "I was ashamed. I kept telling myself I would fix everything after the inspection. I thought time would solve it." Abigail's voice remained gentle. "Time never solves cowardice. It only exposes it." Gregory covered his face with both hands. "I'm sorry." Those 2 words were everything she had waited weeks to hear, yet they could not erase what had happened. "I'm willing to forgive you." She paused. "But trust isn't rebuilt with apologies. It's rebuilt with choices." The next morning, Daniel called his attorney. Every adoption document was destroyed, every copy, every draft. He asked Abigail to watch as each page passed through the shredder. "I never want you to wonder again." She nodded. For the first time since arriving, she believed him completely. A month later, Abigail gave birth to a healthy baby boy. When the nurse placed him in her arms, she cried harder than she ever had before, not because life had suddenly become easy, but because for the first time in months, every decision belonged to her. Daniel and Claire stood quietly outside the hospital room. They didn't ask to hold the baby. They waited. When Abigail finally invited them inside, Claire's tears flowed freely as she gently kissed the baby's tiny forehead. "Thank you," she whispered, not for giving them a child, for trusting them enough to remain part of his life. 3 months later, Gregory Foster resigned as director of Charleston Regional Hospital. Many people believed he had simply retired. Only his family knew the real reason. He had finally decided that rebuilding one broken relationship mattered more than protecting one successful career. Daniel established a charitable foundation that provided housing, medical care, and educational support for pregnant teenagers abandoned by their families. "It should have started long before Abigail," he admitted. "Claire volunteered there every week, not as someone looking for another child, but as someone determined to make sure no frightened girl ever felt alone again." One spring morning, Abigail unlocked the door to a small apartment she had rented herself. It wasn't large, it wasn't luxurious, but every piece of furniture belonged to her. Every dream inside those walls belonged to her too. Her son laughed from his stroller as sunlight poured through the windows. A gentle knock sounded at the door. Daniel, Claire, and Gregory stood outside together, no longer connected by secrets, only by honesty. Abigail smiled. "Come in." As they stepped inside, she looked down at her son sleeping peacefully in her arms. Months earlier, she had believed losing her home meant losing her future. Instead, God had quietly closed one door, so he could lead her to a family built not on fear, reputation, or desperate dreams, but on truth, forgiveness, and love. Sometimes the greatest miracle isn't finding people who never make mistakes. It's finding people humble enough to admit them, and brave enough to change. As we come to the end of this story, I hope it leaves you with one simple truth. God often performs his greatest miracles in ways we never expect. Sometimes he doesn't remove every hardship from our path. Instead, he places the right people in our lives at exactly the right moment, giving us the strength to keep walking when we think we can't take another step. Life will disappoint us. People we love may let us down. Doors will close. Dreams may seem to fall apart. But our Heavenly Father sees every tear we cry and hears every prayer whispered in the silence. His timing is always greater than our understanding. What feels like the end today may become the beginning of a beautiful blessing tomorrow. I truly believe that every act of kindness, every choice to forgive, and every decision to keep hope alive becomes a seed that God can grow into something far greater than we could ever imagine. As the creator behind this channel, I want to share something personal with you. Even though I am raising 2 children on my own, and life has not always been easy, I choose to wake up every day with hope instead of fear. There have been seasons when money was scarce, when the future felt uncertain, and when giving up seemed easier than moving forward. But I have learned that as long as God gives us another sunrise, he is giving us another chance. So I keep believing, I keep working, and I keep smiling, trusting that brighter days are always ahead. If this story touched your heart today, please help this channel grow by leaving a comment below. I'd love to know where you're watching from, and what part of this story spoke to you the most. Please share this video with your family and friends, so together we can spread more kindness, hope, and faith. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss future stories. Finally, May God bless you and your family with good health, peace, strength, and endless hope. May He protect your home, guide your steps, comfort your heart during difficult times, and fill your life with His amazing grace. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Until we meet again, may the Lord walk beside you every single day.